We are back at the Brookfield Zoo. I'm doing some design work right now to renovate the aviary, including a flamingo pond. Stay tuned, this is gonna be one incredible project. A really unique exhibit inside here. They call it the swamp. Very, very cool stuff. But we are actually going to look at this for another project, and it is going to be for flamingos. Let's go check it out. So I am super excited about going into the Brookfield Zoo to do some work over there. You know I love all my different animals and everything, so doing work at the zoo, doing work at a nature preserve, anything along those lines always gets me excited. Challenge that we have is, especially at a location like the Brookfield Zoo, they are very established, and that means they have a lot of existing infrastructure already designed into the facility. So for us to come in to make a change, they either have to be willing to completely do a renovation by ripping everything out and starting over, which can be very costly, or we're going to come in and we're going to modify an existing system. So in this particular project, we are going to modify an existing system. I'm very excited about the actual location. It's actually in the swamp exhibit, which is one of my favorites. Love going to looking at nature, looking in those riparian zones, those soft, marshy, boggy type areas. The amount of wildlife is unbelievable. Biodiversity is just off the charts. So it's just a ton of fun. So what we're going to be doing here at the zoo is actually working in a section that they're turning into a large aviary. So we're going to be working with a variety of different types of birds, including flamingos, which will be very cool. What we need to do is we're going to modify an existing concrete structure. So it's an existing pool. So what we're going to try to do is set up an ecosystem. One of the most important things, I believe, if you are on a budget doing a renovation, is to install a proper skimmer system. So having a skimmer that has a basket inside, having a skimmer that would also be even customized, similar to an intake bay, either one of those is very important. The number one thing though that you want to think about is we're drawing in water off of the surface of the pond. We're not drawing in water down here off of the bottom. I want to draw in water off of the surface. The reason we want to do that is when you have uneaten fish food or bird food or organic matter, anything leaf matter that falls inside of the pond, when we turn this pump on, what happens, because this is a relatively small opening here, the water is going to flow in very quickly, because where you have a pump inside of here, that pump is going to discharge the water up and out. It's going to actually leave the system. So the skimmer is going to want to be refilled by water flowing directly into it. So that means any floating debris that you're going to see on the surface and things like that is going to go inside, and there's a catch basket inside. So the catch basket can be easily removed for periodic maintenance. Now, this particular feature, because it's located in the indoors, they have natural plants, so there will be some leaf shedding. The big concern is going to be on any extra food that's going to not be eaten by the animals. We want to make sure that we skim that off, because if it's left by itself in a stagnant pool, if there's no skimmer, that debris becomes saturated, float to the bottom, and then it's going to start to degrade. And during that degradation process, from bacteria, microorganisms, and things like that, it's going to break down to individual components and compounds, which are usually nitrogenous based, especially if it's an organic compound. And what's going to happen during that process is it's going to rob the water of dissolved oxygen. So what happens is the water quality starts to change, the pH starts to change, it stresses out the animals inside of the system. You could have algal blooms, you could have cyanobacteria blooms. There's a whole host of different things that actually could happen. So what we want to do is make sure that we remove as much of that floating debris as possible in any type of a system. So by having the skimmer, I believe it's the number one thing. Now, working with an existing concrete structure, I'm not even sure how thick it is. I'm going to say 6 to 8 inches thick of concrete. So what we're going to do is we want to use one of our existing skimmers for the ease of maintenance. So the animal keepers are going to go in periodically and they're going to clean out that skimmer system. So what we want to do is make it simple, and simply removing a basket is very, very easy. Now the challenge that we have is our skimmer is a set system, so the height of it is actually set. So what we have to do is we're going to have to chip down into the existing bottom and to be able to recess that skimmer box inside. The other thing that we're going to have to do, because the skimmer normally gets buried outdoors, so now in this application, this entire vessel is going to be floating inside of the pond. It's going to have water on all sides of it. It's usually buried and there's only water on one side of it. So because of that, this can become buoyant at certain situations. So I need to anchor it down to the substrate. And the substrate in this application here, this is existing concrete. So instead of drilling into the concrete and using a series of fasteners or something like that, all we're going to do is we're going to chip the concrete out to create a recessed pocket. That's going to allow us to set the skimmer at the appropriate location because there's a set water level inside of the feature. So this will allow us to recess it down, and then we're going to have a series of stainless steel bolts that will penetrate through the actual skimmer box, and then we're going to encase it in mortar. The mortar is going to grab onto those screws, and it's going to give us the necessary structural rigidity that we're actually looking for. Now, the other thing that's going to be happening here in this system is we're going to discharge the water into several different areas. One of them is going to just be a series of underwater jets or surface jets. What we're going to do is have our 2-inch piping. That 2-inch piping will run around the inside perimeter of the concrete, not on the outside. So then we're going to take a series of galvanized straps, and we're going to use Tapcon screws, and we're going to actually bolt that directly to the floor of the existing concrete shell. We're then going to take that 2-inch pipe and reduce it down to 3/4 of an inch. So once we have it reduced down, we're going to use what we call a lock line, which is a flexible structure that we could actually manipulate and move around, and it could create those jets of water that we're looking for. Now, this lock line also has a built-in valve system, so we could increase or decrease the velocity of water. One of the other areas that we're going to be discharging water is going to be in a makeshift biofilter. And again, I'm always manipulating things. I love to create things that I know are going to function. But in this application, we are trying to just work with what they have. And what they actually had was they had this existing concrete setup that was installed, and this was just going to be an aquatic plant shelf. They did a really good job because they put in a pipe system that was actually going through this little planted setup, and it was going to allow water to drain back into the main water feature itself. What I want to do is I'm going to change it a bit. I'm going to put a valve on that. I want to hold water in here at a higher elevation than the normal water level in the pond. I'm then going to use what I call a drainage panel or a flow cell. This is a 3-dimensional panel. It has a high void space. I'm then going to take a pipe system, and I'm actually going to pump water directly into this little system. This is going to allow the water to spread out evenly along the bottom, very, very similar to how our AquaBlox work. But because this whole depth is only 6 inches, the AquaBlox didn't work. The AquaBlox need a lot more room in order for them to function properly. But for this little planted pocket, we're going to take our skimmer, we're going to discharge water into that drainage panel. It's going to go throughout the entire bottom of this little planted area. Then we're going to fill it up with approximately 4 inches of river stone. We're then going to plant it with a variety of different types of aquatic vegetation. These will be bare root plants. The root systems will penetrate down into the gravel system. We will need to periodically maintain those plants. Now, what I like about this, because this drainage panel is like a false bottom, so we have high velocity water coming in. This is going to fill up with sediments and things like that down on the bottom. So periodically, the animal keepers, instead of draining out the entire pond, what they can do is they could flush just this one section. So what we would do is we'd open this valve, and then this water is actually going to be jettisoned out. So any of those sediments and things like that will actually blast their way out for periodic maintenance and removal purposes. I think this is going to be a really, really nice addition to this feature, working exactly with the structures that they had. Be a great test because they have a lot of other features on the property exactly like this. This is the main biofilter. This is very, very similar to all the other wetland filters you've seen me design and build before. So we have this existing concrete structure that I've been talking about. The bottom of one of the pools in the aviary was over 4 feet deep. Our snorkel system is actually 4 feet deep. So actually we had just a little bit of extra room, so everything was going to work out perfectly. And again, this was just luck. The other thing that I think worked out well is they had an existing drain right in the bottom of this deep pool section. So what I did was I cut a hole in the bottom of the snorkel directly over the drain. So now instead of putting a pump inside of this, so normally this wetland filter, we would put a pump inside of here to evacuate all the water inside for periodic cleaning and removal. In this system, we can just open a valve that actually is underground in a sub-level underneath the aviary. We could actually just open this valve, and what's going to happen is all of this stuff is going to be backflowed through our snorkel and centipede, and it's going to leave the system. So that's just the cleaning process. So I just wanted to say how I set this up because that was very, very critical. The other thing that ended up working out here was it actually fit our centipede system. So what I had to do was just bring in a little bit of crushed stone down on the bottom to bring the level up to make it a level surface, because the bottom of this thing was very irregular. So I came in with a series with some crushed stone and some concrete blocks, and I made a channel that was level going all the way across, and then the centipede going to sit directly inside of this. Now on top of this, so then we have our piping system over here. So we're going to have our high velocity water coming in, 93% reduction in water velocity. It's going to allow big sediments to settle out. Then the water is going to evenly flow up into our AquaBlox. Now these AquaBlox are going to have another 91% reduction in water velocity on top of this. So this is a compound sedimentation trap. So now the fine sediments are going to start to build up inside of here. And this is really, really important because this is specifically going to be for the flamingos. So I'm very concerned about the amount of waste that they're going to produce. So remember, we're going to bring it in through the skimmer system. The large solids will be able to be removed, but the liquid wastes and things like that are going to go through the system. They're going to settle out some of the bigger stuff down here in the bottom. Then the water is going to flow up into those sedimentation zones, and the bigger solids will actually drop out of suspension. Now, when this is properly designed, these AquaBlox are 9.5 inches tall. It should take 10 minutes for the water to fill this section. So that's a very, very, very slow 10 minutes. So that's actually going to really slow that water down to allow those fine sediments to be removed. Now, what I did uniquely on this particular project, we have been playing around with some different biofilter media. So we ended up filling these cells inside of our AquaBlox. We filled them with bioballs in certain ones, and then others I did biochar, which is like an activated carbon. And I rotated those two items. So we have biochar, we have bioballs. We have biochar, we have bioballs. So this is going to be a very, very effective strategy because that biochar is going to be able to absorb some of those nitrogenous compounds and the fats and the oils and things like that that are being fed to the flamingos. So they have a very, very rich diet. diet, completely different than a koi fish or something like that. So the waste has to be managed differently. The other nice thing about this is the surface area on the activated carbon on that biochar, as well as the bioballs, is much higher than Riverstone. I still really like using river rock inside of my wetland filters. So these two units together, stacked on top of each other, only came up to 19 inches. So that allowed me to put in another 9 to 10 inches still of river rock on top of this. So once I put that river rock in place, I did 2 different layers. I have 1.5 inches down here on the bottom and this first level, and then I jump up to 3/4 inch on top. We are then going to plant it just like all my other wetlands. I'm going to put it in with a phytoremediation system, so the root zones of these plants are going to penetrate down through the gravel layer. We have symbiotic relationship with all types of microorganisms, and these plants are going to grow like they're on steroids because they're being fed a nutrient-rich solution of waste generated by all the different birds that are living in this amazing aviary.